Good morning. Thank you for joining me for another 5 good minutes with the Word. I'm Barry Bryson. We're continuing our study of the Gospel of Matthew. We're in chapter 20, and we're going to read verses 17 through 19 today. Jesus was about to go up to Jerusalem. He took the 12 disciples aside by themselves, and on the way he said to them, "Behold, we are going up to Jerusalem, and the Son of Man will be delivered up to the chief priests and scribes, and they will condemn him to death, and will deliver him up to the Gentiles to mock and scourge and crucify him, and on the third day he will be raised up." This is the third time that Jesus is just this clear about the way things are going to take place. And he takes the 12 apostles aside. That tells us that as Jesus is going up to Jerusalem, and he's about to enter the city of Jericho, as we're going to find out by the end of the chapter. So he's close. Jericho is the last major city that they would have come to before they went on to Jerusalem. Of course, there were other places, villages like Bethany, between Jericho and Jerusalem, but the last major city they would have come to is Jericho, and they've not entered it yet, it seems. So Jesus takes the 12 aside and speaks to them this clearly, just less than 2 weeks before he's crucified. He's already told them this twice before, and this is the third time. And look at the detail. We're going up to Jerusalem, and I'm going to be handed over to the chief priests and scribes, and I'm going to be condemned to death, and I'm going to be handed over to the Gentiles, and they are going to torture and humiliate me and crucify me, and then I'm going to raise from the dead on the third day. How much more plainly can a man say this? And yet they are completely taken by surprise and are completely unprepared to deal with it when it happens. I just wanted to take this moment. I know we're only looking at these 3 verses, and we've really sort of read them before already twice in Matthew's Gospel, to think about the way Jesus has prepared his apostles for what is about to take place. When Jesus says in his prayer in John 17, and they're listening to this prayer because he prays it in front of them, and he prays it on the night that he's betrayed. He said, I did everything I could do. I've kept them, and except for the one that's going to betray me. I've kept them all, and I have them to hand over to you. He means that, and it's true. Before the disciples, before he washes their feet, right in the middle of the first communion service, which we read about in John 13, it says Jesus understood that he'd done everything he could, that he loved his own, that he kept him together until the very end, and he knew who he was and where he was going to. He knew all that. He got up and rose up from dinner and washed their feet. One of the great tasks Jesus had in his ministry was to call these men and to create in these men a leadership team that would be invested with the Holy Spirit in a way no one else would be, to plant the church around the world. And it doesn't look like he's finished the job, because when all these things are going to take place, that will take place in the next few chapters, and they are so completely unprepared, they have been so absolutely obtuse. It's not just that they didn't get it, they didn't listen. He couldn't have said it more plainly than he did. The very next thing that happens, after him saying, this is what I'm going to be doing, this is the cup that I'm going to have to drink, James and John's mother comes and says, hey, I want these guys to sit on your right hand and your left. It's just infuriating. And it had to be so frustrating for Jesus as well. And it's easier for us as the reader to think, he didn't get through to these guys at all. But he did. He did. After the events, and especially after the Holy Spirit came upon them, the way the Holy Spirit came upon Jesus at his baptism. Not exactly the same way, but came upon them. they're ready. And when they stand up on the day of Pentecost, they're ready. And when they get arrested by the high priest and the same crowd that just weeks before had executed Jesus, they're not the same men. And Peter can stand up. Not the guy that denied Jesus 3 times, not the guy who panicked, drew a blade and cut off Malchus's ear, but calmly say, we must obey God rather than men. They're ready. Jesus has prepared them. Well, let's remember that when we read what happens next, and we pick up with verse 23, or verse 20, next time. Thank you for joining me for another 5 good minutes with the Word.